10 years ago, my wife ran off with my own younger brother, taking all our savings and leaving a cold letter on the kitchen table. I turned to my parents, hoping for some comfort, but they defended him, saying it was my fault, I who failed to keep the family happy. They thought I would collapse. They thought I would never get back up, but they were wrong. I raised my son alone in the harsh Montana winter with calloused hands and a betrayed heart. 10 years later, they returned, cloaked in the guise of wealth and success, still mocking me. They had no idea that what awaited them was the very nightmare they had sown. Hello, my name is Theodore Grant. At 34, I'm no one special, just a mechanic working at Montana Alloy Works, where massive machines roar day and night. My hands are rough, stained with oil that never quite washes off. But my heart, I dare say, is still soft enough for the two most important people in my life. My wife, Catalina, and our little boy, Lucas. We live in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of Helena, Montana, a place with no glamour, but to me it's the whole world. That home was built from years of scraping by, from the sweat dripping on the factory floor and sleepless nights worrying about our son. Our life is simple, sometimes harsh, but I always believed that as long as we had family, everything was worth it. I work shifts day and night, rotating like the machines I maintain. The job isn't easy. The clanging of metal, the pungent smell of oil, and the biting cold of Montana's winter seeping into every fiber of my being. But I never complain. Every extra shift means a bit more money for Lucas's medicine, my 9-year-old son who's had asthma since he was a baby. He carries an inhaler everywhere, and every time I hear his wheezing breaths, my heart feels like it's being squeezed. Lucas is my light, the reason I get up every day, even when I'm so exhausted I could collapse. Today is a typical winter day in Helena. I wake up at 5 in the morning when the sky is still pitch black. Our small apartment sits quietly on a silent road where cold winds rattle the old window frames. I step out of the bedroom carefully, trying not to wake Catalina. She lies there, her brown hair spilling over the pillow, her eyes closed as if lost in a distant dream. Catalina, my wife, was once a passionate art teacher. She painted vibrant canvases, dreaming of gallery shows in big cities. But since Lucas got sick, she quit her job to care for him, her days now revolving around our small kitchen, his medications, and regular doctor visits. Sometimes when I look at her, I see her eyes drift somewhere else, as if searching for the person she used to be, back when she was young, free, and unbound by responsibility. Though life isn't easy, we're here, together like a team. But I know Catalina isn't always content. Some nights, when I come home late from a shift, I find her sitting alone in the living room, staring out the window with a distant look. I know she misses the old days, when she painted, hung out with friends, and lived in a big city full of lights. Helena, to her, sometimes feels like a cage. I try to make up for it, but I'm not a smooth talker. I only know how to work, bring home money, and hope that my love is enough to keep her here. I didn't know that just a few weeks later, everything would change, like a storm sweeping in, tearing away everything I thought would last forever. Everything began to change the day my younger brother Kyle showed up. He was 28, young and flashy like a misplaced pop star in the dreary town of Helena. Kyle had been living in Billings, where he bragged about lavish parties, wide connections, and grand dreams I could never quite understand. While I was a quiet mechanic, head down and working hard, Kyle was always dressed sharply, smooth-talking, and had a way of drawing everyone's attention. But this time, when he knocked on my door on a freezing winter afternoon, I saw a different Kyle. His eyes were still bright, but there was a weariness to them, as if his glamorous aura had been worn thin. "Ted, my man!" Kyle flashed a wide grin, hugging me like we were still two kids playing in the Butte fields. "Long time no see, how you holding up?" "Fine," I replied curtly. "What are you doing here?" Kyle shrugged, his smile unwavering. "Just needed a break, you know. The big city's suffocating. Plus, I missed Lucas." He pulled a shiny new spaceship model from his bag, the expensive kind I could never afford for my son. "For the kid," he said with a wink. Lucas ran out, his eyes lighting up at the sight of the gift. "Uncle Kyle!" He hugged him tightly, and I couldn't help but smile. Lucas always adored his uncle, and I didn't want to stand in the way. Kyle had a knack for making people happy, even me, though I hated to admit it. But deep down, I felt a small thorn prick my heart. Kyle always came like a gust of wind, bringing joy, then vanishing, leaving me with unanswered questions. In the days that followed, Kyle started coming over more often. At first, it was just short visits. He brought gifts for Lucas, told stories about the big city, and made our small apartment feel brighter. Catalina, who was usually quiet, started laughing more when Kyle was around. She asked him about fancy coffee shops, concerts, and the life she once dreamed of. I noticed it, but I told myself I was imagining things. Catalina was my wife, the one who'd stood by me through thick and thin. She wouldn't change, not because of a few glamorous stories. But then Kyle started showing up when I wasn't home. I remember one time coming back from an exhausting overnight shift, barely able to keep my eyes open. I found him in our living room, chatting and laughing with Catalina. The dim yellow light illuminated her face, and I noticed she was wearing a dress she rarely wore at home. The green one she loved when she was younger. "Kyle came to fix the faucet," she said, her voice a little rushed. "It's been leaking since last week." I nodded, saying nothing, but the unease grew stronger. Kyle laughed, clapping me on the shoulder. "You're the real hero of this family, Ted. Working like a mule and still taking care of your wife and kid." His words sounded like praise, but I sensed a hint of mockery. I shook my head, telling myself I was just tired and overthinking. Then another time, as I opened the front door, I overheard Kyle saying, "You deserve better than this town, sis-in-law." Catalina laughed, but that laugh made my heart clench. In the weeks that followed, things slowly shifted. Catalina started paying more attention to her appearance. She bought new lipstick, something she hadn't used since she stopped teaching. She'd stare at her phone, lost in thought, then quickly hide it when I walked in. Once I heard her giggling in the living room, her voice soft in a way I thought was reserved for me. I asked her, trying to keep my tone calm, "You okay, Kat?" She looked at me, her eyes flickering with unease. "I'm fine, honey. Just a funny text from a friend." But I knew it wasn't true. I saw the distance in the way she avoided my gaze, the way she spoke less when we were together. Our dinners, once a time for the family to gather, grew quiet. Lucas still chattered about school, but Catalina only nodded, her mind elsewhere. I'm not good with words. I don't know how to say sweet things like Kyle, don't know how to make Catalina laugh like he does. I only know how to work, bring home money, and hope my love is enough to keep her. But small conflicts started piling up. One time, Lucas's medical bills were higher than expected, and I had to take on extra night shifts. Catalina sighed, her voice bitter. "You're always at the shop, Theodore. I'm here alone, handling everything." I wanted to explain, to say I was doing it all for Lucas, for her, but the words stuck in my throat. One evening, when I came home earlier than usual, I saw Kyle and Catalina on the sofa, sitting closer than they needed to. A bottle of wine sat on the table, something we rarely bought to save money. "Just some wine Kyle brought over," Catalina said, her voice slightly shaky. Kyle grinned, winking. "Just chilling, big bro. Life's too short." I nodded, but inside I was burning. I started noticing small things, the texts Catalina hid, the way she'd go out to run errands but come back with an unusually bright look in her eyes. I saw Kyle at our house too often, even when Lucas was already asleep. Whenever I asked, she had an excuse. Kyle fixed the lamp. Kyle helped Lucas with homework. But I'm not stupid. I felt the change, like a cold wind blowing through our home. Work got heavier. The long night shifts left me drained, but I couldn't stop. Lucas needed medicine, doctors, a father who wouldn't give up. But every night driving home under the pitch-black sky, I felt lonelier than ever. I started to doubt, not just Catalina, but Kyle, the brother I thought would never hurt me. Yet I kept those doubts to myself because I was afraid. Afraid that if I spoke them aloud, everything would shatter. Lucas was my only light. He stayed cheerful, still asking me about everything he was curious about. One night as I bathed him, he grabbed my hand, his voice soft. "Dad, is Mom happy?" She seemed sad a lot. I hugged him, not knowing how to answer. Inside, a storm was brewing, and I didn't know how to protect our home. The days that followed felt like walking through fog. At Montana Alloy Works, I buried myself in work, letting the roar of the machines drown out the doubts screaming in my head. But every time I came home, our small apartment no longer felt like a home. It was like a stage where Catalina played the role of a devoted wife, but her eyes had changed, distant, as if she were in a place I couldn't reach. I tried to hold on. I asked her about her day, suggested we take walks like we did when we were newlyweds. But she only gave me faint smiles, saying she was busy, that Lucas needed her. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe everything was fine, but my heart kept sounding alarms. Kyle kept coming over, bringing shiny gifts and stories that made Lucas light up with laughter. But I noticed the way he looked at Catalina, the way she returned smiles that she used to give me. I told myself I was imagining it, that our love was strong enough to overcome any doubts. But every night, lying in bed, listening to Lucas's steady breathing from the next room, I felt a growing void between me and her. Then one afternoon, everything crumbled. That day, my shift was canceled because a major machine at the shop broke down and management sent us home early for repairs. I drove back, relieved at the rare chance to spend time with Lucas and Catalina earlier than usual. The cold of Helena seeped through my jacket, but I didn't care. I thought about sitting by the fire, listening to Lucas talk about his school stories. I opened the door, stepped inside, and my world shattered. Under the dim yellow light of the living room, I saw them. Catalina and Kyle sitting close on the sofa, her hand resting on his, their eyes locked as if no one else existed. An open bottle of wine sat on the table, 2 glasses glinting with red. Their laughter died as I walked in. Catalina flinched, her face paling, while Kyle just looked at me, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. You're back early?" Catalina stammered, jumping up, her hands fumbling to adjust her dress. I stood frozen, unable to speak. My heart pounded, not from anger, but from pain. A sharp, piercing pain, as if someone had stabbed me in the chest. Kyle smirked, a faint smile I'd never seen on him before. "What's wrong, big bro? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Get out," I said, my voice hoarse, almost a whisper. I didn't look at Kyle, only at Catalina, hoping for an explanation, a hint of remorse, anything I could cling to. But she just stood there, her eyes wavering between fear and defiance. Then she spoke, and each word was like a knife. "Don't act like you're the perfect husband, Theodore. You're never here. All you care about is work, your damn machines. Do you think I want to live forever in this town, in this house, with a man who can't give me anything but sweat and the smell of motor oil?" I was stunned. Those words, harsh and cold, tore apart every year we'd spent together. I wanted to scream, to tell her I did it all for her, for Lucas, for this family. But I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat, and I just stood there like a defeated man. Kyle stood up, patting my shoulder as if we were buddies. "Come on, Ted. Don't make a big deal out of it. Life's short." He laughed, a laugh that made me want to punch him in the face. But I didn't do anything. I turned and walked out, leaving behind the stifling room and the 2 people who had betrayed me. I drove aimlessly, not knowing where to go. The cold wind blew through the car window, but I felt nothing except the pain tearing through my chest. I thought of Lucas playing at a friend's house, unaware that his world was about to collapse. I thought of the years I'd worked, sacrificed, only to end up with this. I pulled over on a deserted road, sat in the darkness, and for the first time in years I cried. Not loudly, just silent tears streaming down my grimy face. That night I returned home, hoping for a miracle, hoping it was all just a nightmare. But when I opened the door, I found only emptiness. Catalina's things were gone. Her clothes, her shoes, even the small wooden box where she kept her old paintings. The apartment, once our home, now felt as cold as a tomb. On the kitchen table lay a single sheet of paper, Catalina's handwriting sharp and cold. I picked it up, my hands trembling. "Theodore," the letter began, "I've chosen a man who truly knows how to live. You never understood me, and I'm tired of trying. Don't look for me. I don't belong here anymore." Those words were the final blade cutting through whatever hope I had left. I checked our joint savings account where we'd scraped together every penny over the years. Money for Lucas's treatment, money for a small house one day. It was empty. Everything, every drop of sweat, every sleepless night was gone with her. The bedroom door opened and Lucas walked in, his eyes wide with confusion. "Dad, where's Mom?" he asked, his voice trembling as if he sensed the unease. I knelt down, hugged him tightly, holding his hand in mine. I wanted to say something, to explain, but I couldn't. How could I tell my son that his mother had left, taking our entire world with her? "I'm here," I whispered, my voice choking. "I'll always be here, Lucas." Since that fateful evening, I barely ate or slept. At night, I lay on the sofa, staring blankly at the ceiling where the echoes of our family's laughter once rang. Now there was only the howling wind through the window and the wheezing breaths of Lucas from the next room, reminding me that he still needed me, even as I was falling apart. The neighbors started talking. Curious glances and whispers followed me as I passed by. Heard his wife ran off with his brother. Poor guy, but who knows, maybe he wasn't good enough. Each word was like a knife slicing into my pride. I wanted to scream, to smash everything, but I only bowed my head, clenched my fists, and kept walking. Work at Montana Alloy Works was the only place I could escape. I threw myself into the machines, checking every bolt, every gear, as if they could fix my broken life. But when each shift ended, I had to face the empty apartment, with Catalina's letter still lying on the kitchen table like a scar that wouldn't heal. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, nor could I bear to read it again. It sat there, a constant reminder that I had lost everything: my wife, my savings, my trust. In my desperation, I decided to turn to my parents. I thought no matter what, they would understand. They would be furious with Kyle, comfort me, or at least help me find some semblance of justice. I called ahead, my voice trembling. "I need to talk. I'm coming over." My mother responded, her tone flat. "All right, come by." No questions, no concern, but I still held on to hope. I needed someone, anyone, to be on my side. I drove for over an hour from Helena to the old house on the hill south of Butte, where Kyle and I grew up. The winding, snow-covered road took me through familiar fields. The house came into view, old and quiet, with smoke rising from the chimney. I stepped inside, feeling like I was returning to childhood, but the warmth was gone. My father sat by the fireplace, his eyes fixed on a newspaper. My mother was in the kitchen kneading dough. They looked at me, nodded, but asked nothing, as if I were just a passing visitor. I sat down and poured out everything. The words spilled like water from a broken dam. About Catalina, about Kyle, about the letter, about the empty savings account. I spoke with the hope they would understand, get angry, call Kyle back to face me. But when I looked up, I saw only coldness. My father folded his newspaper and sighed. "Kyle's young, impulsive," he said, his voice as casual as if he were talking about the weather. "You're the older brother. You should know how to let things go. This will pass." I was stunned, feeling as if I'd been slapped. "Let it go?" I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. "He stole my wife, stole the money I saved for Lucas." "How can you say that?" My mother stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes reproachful. "Theodore, you didn't know how to hold on to your happiness. You're always buried in work. A woman like Catalina, young and beautiful, how could she not get restless? You should have known how to keep her instead of letting her find joy elsewhere." Each word from her was a sharp, cruel blade. I sat there, numb, unable to believe that my parents, the people I thought would be my last refuge, could defend Kyle. I looked at them, their familiar faces now as foreign as strangers. And then, childhood memories flooded back, vivid as if they'd happened yesterday. I remembered the summer when I was 8, spending the entire season building a toy car from scrap wood in my father's garage. I meticulously carved and painted it, dreaming of the day I'd show it to my parents. But when I brought it out, Kyle, then 5, grabbed it and broke a wheel. I cried not for the car, but because my parents didn't scold him. Instead, my father said, "You're older. You need to let your brother have his way." My mother hugged Kyle, comforting him as if I were the one at fault. The wooden car, my summer's labor, was tossed into a corner of the garage, never mentioned again. I remembered evenings around the dinner table, when my mother always gave Kyle the best piece of meat while I got the burnt scraps. "Kyle's young. He needs to eat well to grow," she'd say, as I sat there, hungry not just for food but for attention. I remembered the day I won first place in a school writing contest, bursting with excitement to show my parents the certificate. But my father only glanced at it before turning to ask Kyle about his soccer game. "Good thing Kyle was there to cheer you on," he said, though Kyle had nothing to do with it. Every achievement of mine was overshadowed by Kyle. Every mistake of his was blamed on me. I remembered the time Kyle broke my mother's favorite vase, and I was punished, forced to stand outside in the freezing Butte cold for an hour because I didn't watch him closely enough. I stood there, shivering, looking through the window as my mother held Kyle while I was just a shadow in their eyes. My childhood was a series of days carrying the weight of my brother's responsibilities, while the love I craved was always dismissed. I tried to forget those injustices, thinking adulthood would change things. I left Butte, built my own life, married Catalina, had Lucas, and thought I'd escaped Kyle's shadow. But sitting before my parents now, I realized their favoritism had never faded. I was naive to think time would change them. I stood up, saying nothing more. My father looked at me, his eyes cold. "Don't make a big deal out of this, Theodore. Family means forgiveness." I didn't respond, just turned and walked out. The cold wind stung my face, but I felt nothing but emptiness. The old house on the hill, once a place of childhood memories, was now a stranger's home, a place I no longer belonged. I drove back to Helena, my mind in turmoil. But when I opened the apartment door, Lucas ran to me, hugging me tightly. "Dad's back," he cheered, his eyes lighting up as he pulled out an old medical book he'd borrowed from the library. "Dad, I read this about lungs. Did you know there's a way to help people with asthma breathe easier?" He spoke with enthusiasm, his voice full of life, as if his world still shone brightly. I knelt down, hugging him tightly, feeling the small beat of his heart. In that moment, I snapped awake. If the whole world turned its back on me, Catalina, Kyle, my parents, I still had Lucas. He was the only reason I could stand up, the only reason to keep living. "If the whole world turns away," I whispered to myself, "we'll lean on each other and survive." Time passed, and Lucas and I became two pieces of a shattered puzzle, trying to fit ourselves back together. The small apartment in Helena, once a home for 3, now held just the 2 of us. But I was determined to make it a sanctuary for us both. Every morning I woke up early, brewed coffee, made toast, and prepared breakfast for Lucas. Though only 9 years old, he was more mature than I'd expected. He stopped asking about his mother as if he knew the answer would hurt me. Instead, he held my hand, his eyes sparkling, and talked about things he'd read in an old medical book borrowed from the library. I smiled, ruffled his hair, and silently thanked him for keeping his light alive despite the darkness that had descended. Work at Montana Alloy Works remained my anchor, but now it was more than just a way to earn money. It was what kept me standing. I worked hard, checking every machine detail, trying to finish shifts early to get back to Lucas. But night shifts were still a haunting necessity. I couldn't leave him alone, so I relied on Mrs. Harriet, the kind neighbor with silver hair and a warm smile who lived next door. She was always willing to watch Lucas when I had to work late. "He's a good boy, Theodore," she said, her eyes full of empathy. "He'll be fine, and so will you." I nodded, thanked her, but deep down I knew I wasn't fine. Not yet. Lucas, as Mrs. Harriet said, was a special boy. He was well-mannered, polite, and more independent than his peers. He started tidying the house, folding clothes, and even making simple meals like egg sandwiches when I came home late. One time I found him standing on a chair, carefully frying eggs in the kitchen, his mother's oversized apron hanging loosely on him. "I made this for you, Dad," he said, his voice full of pride. I sat down, ate the slightly burnt sandwich, and felt my eyes sting. My little boy, so young, was trying to fill the void his mother left behind. Seeing Lucas grow up, I decided to cut back on night shifts, even if it meant less income. I didn't want him to grow up lonely the way I had in the shadow of favoritism. I spent more time with him, reading medical books together, listening to him talk about the wonders of the human body. "Dad, I want to be a doctor when I grow up," he said once, his eyes shining. I hugged him, a mix of pride and pain swelling in my chest. My fragile boy, always carrying his inhaler, was dreaming of saving others. Our life wasn't easy, but it had moments of warmth. In the evenings, we sat by the fireplace, doing homework or reading together. Lucas loved asking about how the body worked, and I, though no expert, answered with what I'd learned from him. "Dad, lungs are like machines, right?" he asked, and I laughed, nodded, thinking this boy would go further than I ever dreamed. But life wasn't always calm. Lucas's asthma remained a looming shadow. One winter afternoon while I was at work, my phone rang. It was Lucas's teacher, her voice trembling. "Mr. Grant, Lucas is having a severe breathing attack. He's been taken to the hospital." My heart stopped. I dropped everything, rushed out of the shop, and drove through Helena's thick snow. The biting cold cut through me, but I felt nothing but fear. When I reached the hospital, I saw Lucas on a bed, his face pale, an oxygen mask covering half of it. I grabbed his hand, trembling, silently praying. "I'm here, Lucas. Dad's here." Thankfully, the doctors saved him in time. After a few days of monitoring, Lucas recovered, but I didn't leave the hospital for a moment. I sat by his bed, holding his hand through the night, watching his weak breaths grow steadier. In the darkness of the hospital room, I vowed it wouldn't happen again. I would do everything to keep him healthy, to give him a future. As time passed, Lucas grew stronger with proper treatment and a healthier lifestyle. He became active and sociable, a far cry from the frail boy of years past. He excelled in school, especially in science, always bringing home thick medical books. "I want to help people who struggle to breathe like I used to," he said, his voice firm as if it were his life's mission. I looked at him, filled with pride, but also a pang of pain, remembering the hardships he'd overcome. As for me, I slowly found my rhythm again. Thanks to my diligence, skill, and sense of responsibility, I was promoted to technical supervisor at Montana Alloy Works. The new job gave me a steadier income and more flexible hours. I no longer had to work endless night shifts, and I started saving for a small house, no longer a cramped rented apartment. The day we moved into our new home, Lucas ran around the yard laughing brightly. "Dad, is this really our house?" he asked, and I nodded, feeling a bit of light return to my life. When Lucas turned 18, he received an acceptance letter from the University of Montana's School of Medicine, specializing in respiratory and pulmonary care, the very illness that had forced him to carry an inhaler throughout his childhood. That day, I held the letter, reading it over and over, speechless. Lucas looked at me and smiled. "Dad, I did it." He hugged me, and I hugged him back tightly, tears silently streaming down my face. From the frail boy of years ago, Lucas had grown into a strong, confident young man, full of determination. He was my greatest pride, proof that even after betrayal and pain, I could build something beautiful from the ruins. My son. 10 years have passed since Catalina and Kyle left, taking my entire world with them. I'm now 44, my hair starting to gray, my face weathered by years of hardship. But I stand here, calm and seasoned, in the small house Lucas and I built together in Helena. Our life is no longer shrouded in darkness. I still work at Montana Alloy Works with a steadier schedule and enough money to support Lucas through college. Our modest home, though not luxurious, is filled with laughter and evenings spent reading together, debating medical topics, or simply sitting by the fireplace, listening to the autumn wind whisper outside the window. Lucas, now 19, is a freshman in the medical program at the University of Montana. Tall and mature, with bright eyes and a smile that melts away all my fatigue. He's not just my son, but my closest friend. Every weekend he comes home, sharing stories about school, professors, and his dream of becoming a respiratory specialist. "Dad, I want to help people like me. People who fight to breathe," he says, his voice resolute. I look at him filled with pride, but also a twinge of sorrow, remembering the days when he was a frail boy, clutching his inhaler like a lifelong companion. One autumn weekend morning, Helena glowed with the golden hues of maple leaves. Lucas and I decided to visit Helena Crossing Mall to buy books and some school supplies for him. He eagerly pulled me into the bookstore, his eyes lighting up as he scanned shelves of medical texts. "Dad, I need this one," he said, holding up a thick book, his voice brimming with excitement. I smiled, nodded, and let him dive into his selection. "I'm going for a walk. Call me when you're done," I said, stepping outside to enjoy the crisp autumn air. Helena's streets were lively yet peaceful, with families strolling, children running, and the sweet scent of waffles wafting from a nearby stand. I walked slowly, breathing deeply, feeling the warm autumn sun on my shoulders. 10 years ago, I never imagined I could stand here so calm after everything that happened. Lucas gave me strength, and I had learned to let go of the past, or at least I thought I had. Then amidst the crowd, I saw them. Catalina and Kyle walking side by side, dressed impeccably like a successful couple straight out of a glossy magazine. She wore an expensive fur coat, her wavy hair shimmering in the sunlight. Kyle, in a tailored suit and sunglasses, had a smug smile on his lips. For a moment, I was pulled back to that snowy night 10 years ago. The empty house, the cold letter on the kitchen table, and Kyle's defiant stare. Bitterness, anger, and humiliation surged, burning in my throat like an old flame reignited. I stood frozen, fists clenched, unsure whether to turn away or confront them. Catalina spotted me first. Her eyes widened, a flicker of unease crossing her face, quickly replaced by a smug expression. She tugged Kyle's arm, approaching me with a voice sweet but sharp. "Theodore, it's been a while. You're the same as ever, aren't you?" Her gaze swept over me, disdainfully noting my worn jacket and dusty boots. Kyle stood beside her, smirking. "Big bro, still slaving away at that shop? How's life treating you? Still getting by?" They launched into a performance, as if I were the audience for a well-rehearsed play. Catalina bragged about their European vacations, their luxurious apartment in Billings, and the free life she'd always dreamed of. Kyle chimed in, boasting about his successful business, his big connections, and the money flowing in like water. Then he looked at me, his tone mocking. "And you, Theodore? Still looking after that sickly kid? Pretty pitiful." I wanted to scream at them, to tell them they knew nothing about me, about Lucas, about what we'd overcome. But I stayed silent, knowing words wouldn't change anything. Just then I heard a voice. "Dad!" Lucas approached, wearing his medical school blazer, a thick medical book tucked under his arm. He stood beside me, his gaze calm but proud, like a true man. Catalina froze, her mouth agape, disbelief in her eyes. "Lucas?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Before her was no longer the frail boy clutching an inhaler, but a tall, confident young man with eyes that held no resentment, but also no forgiveness. Kyle looked down, avoiding my gaze, his smug smile gone. Lucas stood tall, his voice clear, each word ringing in the quiet air. He recounted everything, things I later told him about the year he was 9, when his mother abandoned us in an empty house, taking our money and leaving a cold letter behind. Then he spoke of his father, the man they mocked who raised him, gave him life, education, and the chance to become who he was today. He held his head high, his voice steady but his eyes blazing, as if declaring, "We don't need pity, nor do we need your approval. We've found true happiness." Catalina bowed her head, tears welling up, overcome with shame for the first time in years. Kyle stood silent, unable to meet his brother's eyes. They left in heavy silence. As their figures faded into the crowd, I let out a soft sigh, as if releasing a burden I'd carried for years. Lucas turned to me, smiling gently, his voice low and warm. "You don't need to worry about them anymore, Dad." In the golden autumn afternoon, we walked side by side, leaving behind the dark past and those who betrayed us, moving forward into the life we had preserved and built with resilience, love, and pride. A few weeks after the encounter at Helena Crossing Mall, life for Lucas and me settled back into its familiar rhythm. One early winter evening, as the cold began to bite at our skin, Lucas and I sat in the living room. The fireplace crackled, casting an orange glow across his face. Lucas was reading a medical book, carefully jotting notes in the margins, occasionally looking up to ask, "Dad, do you know how many alveoli are in the lungs?" I laughed, shaking my head, pretending to be annoyed. "You think I'm a doctor or something?" He burst out laughing, a clear, bright sound that melted away all the heaviness inside me. Moments like these, however small, were why I kept living, kept fighting. Then the landline rang, cutting through our conversation. The screen displayed an unknown number, no name. I glanced at Lucas, who shrugged, signaling me to pick up. I hesitated for a few seconds, a bad feeling rising in my chest. Finally, I lifted the receiver, my voice cautious. "Hello?" On the other end, a voice spoke, slow, cold, but dripping with smugness. It was Kyle. "Big bro," he said, drawing out the words as if savoring them. "It's been a while, hasn't it? You should thank me, you know. Thanks to me, you saw Catalina's true colors, right? I even helped you get revenge, didn't I?" He let out a dry laugh, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "She's got nothing left, Ted. Nothing." I froze, my hand tightening around the receiver. "What are you talking about, Kyle?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger and confusion. But the line went dead, leaving only the monotonous beep in the silence. I stood there, heart pounding, a sense of dread gripping my chest. Lucas looked at me, his eyes worried. "Dad, who was that?" I shook my head, unable to answer because I didn't understand what was happening myself. Minutes later, a frantic knock echoed at the door, urgent and desperate. I walked over, opened it, and froze. There stood Catalina. Gone was the poised, glamorous woman I'd seen at the mall. She was haggard, her hair disheveled, dark circles under her eyes, her face gaunt as if life had drained her dry. Her thin coat was torn at the shoulder, her shoes caked with mud, and her eyes, once sharp and cold, now held only desperation. Despite the resentment still burning inside me, I couldn't leave her standing in the cold. "Come in," I said, my voice hoarse, opening the door wider. Lucas stepped out from the living room, standing silently behind me, his gaze cold but not scornful, as if he'd prepared for this moment. Catalina looked at him, her eyes flickering with unease, but she said nothing, only lowering her head as she stepped inside. She sat down, her trembling hands clutching each other. Then she broke down, her choked sobs shattering the quiet of the house. "Theodore, I have nothing left," she said, her voice breaking. She poured out everything, as if tearing open old wounds. She spoke of her life with Kyle in Billings, of his sweet promises, investment projects, companies that would bring wealth and prestige. She had believed him, transferring all her savings into his name, thinking it was business capital. But just weeks after returning to Helena, Kyle vanished. She searched everywhere, only to discover he'd run off with a younger woman, taking all the money and documents with him. The success Kyle had bragged about at the mall was a hollow facade. He was drowning in debt, hunted by creditors. After leaving Helena, he'd convinced Catalina to take out loans in her name to buy a house in Billings, claiming it was the first step for a new venture. But it was all a ploy for him to borrow more and squander it recklessly. When the bank discovered the unpayable loans, the house was foreclosed and Catalina lost everything: her home, her money, and the last shred of her dignity. "I have nowhere else to go," she said, her voice shattered, tears streaming down her face. You're all I have left, Theodore. I looked at her in silence. Lucas stood beside me, his expression unwavering, though I saw his hand clench, as if holding back something. In our small house, the three of us sat in silence. I remembered the letter she left behind. I remembered the sleepless nights holding Lucas so he wouldn't cry for his mother. And now, she sat here, not out of remorse, but because she had lost everything. No one spoke another word. The past between us was closed, cruel but just, like life's way of punishing those who chase illusions. I looked at Catalina not with hatred but with emptiness. She was no longer the wife I once loved, just a stranger carrying her own scars. Catalina buried her face in her hands, her trembling fingers clinging to the edge of the chair as if it were her last anchor. The fireplace crackled, but its warm light couldn't reach the corner of the room where she sat. Her voice was choked and halting, as if every word had to fight to break free. Theodore, I was wrong, she said, tears streaming down her gaunt face. Kyle manipulated me. He promised me a better life, the things I always dreamed of. But it was all lies. I just want to make things right, Theodore. I want to start over. She looked up, her hollow eyes meeting mine, then shifting to Lucas, who stood silently behind me. Lucas, she called, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I was wrong to leave you. I just want to be with you, to start again. She reached out toward him as if a single touch could erase a decade of abandonment. But Lucas didn't move. He stood there, his gaze calm, like someone who had long since learned to face pain. I sat in silence, looking at the woman before me, the one who had torn apart my family, my trust in people. 10 years ago, her harsh words had shredded my heart. 10 years ago, she left me and Lucas taking the money we'd saved for his medical treatment. And now she sat here begging for forgiveness, but I felt no anger, nor did I feel pity. My heart held only a weary, tranquil emptiness, as if all my emotions had been worn away by time. I studied her, searching for a trace of the Catalina I once knew, the woman who used to laugh brightly by my side, who painted vibrant canvases, who held Lucas and sang him to sleep. But that woman was gone, replaced by a stranger, haggard and desperate. I realized she hadn't returned out of remorse. She came back because she had nowhere else to go. Her so-called desire to start over wasn't born from the heart, but from the desperate instinct of someone who had lost everything. Lucas stood beside me, watching in silence. I turned to him and our eyes met. A slight but firm nod, as if he understood every thought in my mind. In that moment, I knew my son, though only 19, was mature enough to face the truth. He didn't need empty promises from the mother who abandoned him. He supported me just as I had always supported him through the hardest years. I took a deep breath, feeling the chill of Helena's winter flood my chest. Catalina, I said, my voice steady but resolute, you should go. Don't disrupt our lives anymore. You don't belong here. She froze, her eyes widening as if she couldn't believe what she'd heard. Theodore, please, she pleaded, her voice trembling. I have nothing left. I just want a chance. But I stood, walked to the door, and flung it open. Cold wind rushed in, carrying flurries of snow like an invisible boundary between the past and the present. Catalina sobbed uncontrollably, but I didn't waver. I wasn't cruel, but I understood that forgiveness sometimes means letting go, not opening your heart. She stood, stepping out into the snow, her frail figure fading into the white flurry. I gently closed the door, the howling wind outside sounding like a final goodbye. I turned back to find Lucas looking at me. His eyes were filled with peace, free of resentment, only understanding. Dad, he said softly, are we okay? I nodded, pulling him into a hug. We sat together again in our small, warm home, a place of peace we'd earned through a decade of pain. The fireplace kept burning, and outside the snow fell thicker, but for the first time in years I felt a weight lift from my heart. After that fateful night, life for Lucas and me settled back into a simple but profoundly meaningful rhythm. Our small house in Helena, with its creaky windows and white walls yellowed by time, became our sanctuary. We grew closer than ever, sharing quiet joys. On weekend evenings when Lucas came home, we'd sit by the fireplace, and he'd tell me about his lectures, how doctors save lives, and his dream of helping those who struggle to breathe find their rhythm again. "Dad, today I learned about oxygen therapy," he said, eyes sparkling. "It can save people like me." I listened, smiling, my heart swelling with joy. As time passed, Lucas grew not just physically but in spirit. He graduated from the University of Montana's School of Medicine with honors, an achievement I knew he'd poured his heart and mind into. On graduation day, I stood in the stands watching Lucas step up to receive his diploma, his black gown fluttering in the breeze. He turned, scanning the crowd for me, and smiled. The same smile of the boy from years ago, now a man. My eyes welled up, not just from pride, but from the realization that every effort, every sacrifice, the late-night shifts, the days wrestling with pain, had been worth it. I clapped, my throat tight, knowing that if I'd done one thing right in my life, it was raising Lucas to become the person he was today. After graduation, Lucas was accepted into a major medical institute in Missoula, where he began his journey to become a respiratory specialist. He worked tirelessly but never forgot to visit me every weekend. "Dad, I have to come back or you'll miss me too much," he teased. But I knew he needed these moments with me as much as I needed him. Our life was simple, a dinner of stew and potatoes, a walk along the Missouri River, or just sitting together listening to the autumn wind rustle through the trees. It was the peace I once thought I'd never find again. As for Catalina, I heard about her through an acquaintance in Helena a few months after our last encounter. She was living a vagrant life, drifting through nearby towns, her clothes tattered, her hair disheveled, her eyes vacant. People said she'd sit for hours at bus stations muttering Kyle's name, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, as if she no longer knew where she was. When the police found her, Catalina was in a severe state of exhaustion, gaunt, plagued by chronic insomnia, speaking incoherently and reacting with panic. They admitted her to the state psychiatric facility for those with severe mental disorders. After that, no one heard anything more about her. When I heard her story, I stayed silent. I felt no resentment nor any pity. She was part of a past I had learned to let go of, just as I'd let go of the letter she left behind 10 years ago. My parents, now old and frail, lived alone in their old house in Butte. After Kyle vanished, taking their illusions with him, they finally saw their blindness. Once my mother called, her voice trembling. "Theodore, I'm sorry." I didn't know Kyle would do that, but I only replied briefly, politely but distant. "I'm fine, don't worry." I no longer held grudges or wanted to dig up old wounds. I just wanted peace for me and Lucas. I called to check on them occasionally, but our conversations were short. More duty than affection. Our life, Lucas's and mine, though imperfect, was everything I needed. Each morning I opened the window, watching snow fall gently on the yard, and thought about the journey we'd been through. Lucas, once a frail boy with an inhaler, was now a young doctor with a mission to save lives. And I, a man who once lost everything, stood here with a home and a son who was my greatest pride. We had weathered the storm, not by seeking revenge or clinging to the past, but through love and resilience. Now, at 50, I live a quiet but fulfilling life in our small house in Helena. My hair has grayed more, my face etched with a few more wrinkles from years of hardship, but my eyes, I dare say, still hold a spark. The spark of a man who has rediscovered himself. Each morning I brew a cup of coffee, open the window, and let Montana's chill flood in, carrying the scent of snow and pine. I sit on the porch watching the first light of day filter through the trees and feel a stillness in my heart. Life is no longer noisy or bitter, only peaceful. A peace I traded my youth to find. Lucas, now a young doctor in Missoula, still comes home every weekend. He walks in, tall in his long coat, bringing stories of patients, surgeries, and people he's helped reclaim their breath. "Dad, this week I met a patient with asthma like I used to have," he says, his voice brimming with passion. "I helped him, Dad. I think I'm doing the right thing. I listen, smiling, my heart swelling with pride. From the boy who trembled through asthma attacks, clutching his inhaler like a constant companion, Lucas has become someone who brings hope to others. He's not just my pride, but proof that even the deepest wounds can heal if you don't give up. On weekend evenings when Lucas is home, we talk about everything, from medicine to old memories. He loves sharing advances in asthma treatment, lessons from his professors in Missoula, and his dream of opening a clinic for struggling patients. "Dad, I want to help people who can't afford medicine like you did for me," he says, his eyes shining. I nod, saying nothing, but inside I know he's inherited the kindness I've always tried to hold on to, despite life's betrayals. Looking back on my journey, I understand that some wounds never fully fade. Catalina's letter, Kyle's defiant stare, my parents' coldness. They linger like faint scars on my heart. But time and compassion have taught me how to stand again. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about forgetting. It's about not letting the past control you. I didn't choose revenge or cling to those who left. Instead, I chose Lucas, chose love, chose to live kindly despite life's cruelty. I recall one winter morning when I found an old diary in a drawer. Its yellowed pages chronicled those stormy days, the nights I stayed up, holding Lucas so he wouldn't cry for his mother, the days I worked to exhaustion to afford his medicine. In it I wrote of pain, of betrayal, but also of Lucas, the boy who gave me a reason to keep going. I flipped to the last page where I'd written a line I'd never read aloud. "Even if the world collapses, I still have Lucas, and that's enough." I closed the diary, tucking it away with an old photo of me, Catalina, and Kyle, a keepsake I didn't need to bury but no longer had the power to hurt me. I want to tell those who faced betrayal, injustice, or loss, don't seek revenge. Let life deliver justice in its own way. Don't hold on to those who've left. If they're unworthy, let them fade like a passing breeze. And most importantly, choose what's right, even when it's hard. It's in the toughest years that we truly grow, that we find life's meaning. To Lucas, I always say, don't be afraid to be kind, even if it puts you at a disadvantage. Kindness may not win you immediate victories, but it lets you sleep at night without shame. He nods, smiles, and I know he understands. He's grown up with an open heart, untainted by the bitterness of past hurts. Each time he talks about his patients, about those he's helped, I see in him a better version of myself, a man who doesn't let pain define his life. One afternoon, I stood on the porch watching Lucas play with the neighborhood kids in the yard. He was teaching them how to make a kite, laughing loudly as it soared into Montana's sky. The sunset bathed his hair, my face in a warm glow, a reminder that we'd overcome the darkness. I thought of the years gone by, of Catalina, Kyle, my parents, and realized something. Life can take much from you. Money, pride, even those you love. But if you hold on to kindness, faith, and love for those who stay, you've never truly lost anything. Lucas called from the yard, "Dad, come watch the sunset with me." I stepped out, standing beside him, watching the fiery sun sink behind the hills. In that moment, I smiled, the smile of a man who'd weathered a storm and found himself again. Our life, though simple, is proof that love and resilience can rebuild a home from the ruins of the past.